So welcome to our Dying Matters Awareness Week video. This week we are talking about dying. It's not a subject we talk about often, but we want to change that and encourage people to have open and honest discussions. Throughout the week we have put on a number of events, from pre-recorded videos and interviews like this one to in-person discussions and awareness events. Today we're talking about care for those who are left behind after a death, and we're delighted to be joined by Julie from Butterflies Bereavement Support, who are a charity based in Eastleigh, but covering all of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So let's start by getting to know Julie and Butterflies a bit. Julie, can you tell us a bit about you and Butterflies?
Be glad to. I've been with Butterflies for not that long, coming up a couple of years, but my involvement with counselling was started 20 years ago. So, and I did some bereavement training then, and with Winchester Bereavement Support. So I'm spreading myself around Hampshire a bit. Butterflies itself is a charity that was founded about 6 years ago by a gentleman and his friends who experienced a number of bereavements and couldn't find the right support for them. So Paul set up Butterflies to provide free counselling for everybody across the board, irrespective of their income. Something sadly we've had to change a little bit, but it's still freely available for people in need, to provide that external source of comfort that is different. I can't explain why it's different, but with a counsellor, you're not going to get there. You'll get over it. You'll deal with it all right. Just give it time. Counsellors understand that it may have triggered other stuff for you. So talking to somebody who's got no knowledge of your own baggage is really, really helpful, as I'm sure you find in your role.
Indeed. Thank you, Julie. So, Julie, we know that grief can affect people in different ways. One of the most common questions that I get when I meet someone who is grieving is this normal? So I want to ask you, what is normal when someone is grieving? Is it normal to see and hear the person who has died, to be angry with everyone, to feel anxious all the time, to go over and over every detail of the death, to feel numb, to cry all the time, or maybe not even be able to cry, to feel physically ill, not to be able to sleep, or maybe sleep all the time and not be able to eat, or maybe eat more than usual? What is normal, and what would you say to someone who's experiencing some of those things I've just listed?
I would say to them, in the same way that every bereavement is individual and no two are the same, we react differently to each bereavement we're involved in. And equally, all those things you described are part and parcel of somebody's bereavement process. It might not be yours, it might not be mine, but there'll be elements of all of that in our processes. There's no such thing as a normal bereavement. And I'd ask that person to be kind to themselves, to allow themselves to be, and to go with the flow in a way. If it goes on too long for them, then that's the time to get some help and support. But if it's in the early days, there's going to be numbness, there's going to be anger, there's going to be disbelief, there's going to be, forgive me for saying this, negotiations with God, and arguments with God. I've got an ongoing 12-year-old argument with him. And it's all those things: not being able to sleep, overeating, not caring who you upset, not caring whether you wash your hair, have a shave, have a shower, put clean underwear on, all those sorts of things. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. You are dealing with the way that you've internalized that emotion of grief. And yeah, everybody's different.
Thank you. I imagine that would be really helpful for someone to hear that today. A bit later, I'm going to ask you about how we can help as colleagues and managers. But first, can I ask you what advice you would give someone who suffered a bereavement and has maybe taken some time off work? What might help them return to the workplace, them as an individual?
Okay. First thing I always advise people is, if they're working and they have a bereavement, is and their employers do not have a fair and practical bereavement policy, is to get yourself signed off, because it does affect your physical well-being, and that gives you that additional space. You don't need any more stress. You don't need to feel, oh, I've got to get over this in 2 days or 5 days or 10 days or whatever. You know, I've got to get back to work. Gets, you know, a 2-week sign off will take that pressure off of you. Maybe you'll need longer. But my advice would be to negotiate with your boss to go back in a day before, not to do any work, just to go in late morning or early afternoon and just go round and speak to the people who you work with, or who you're friends with, or depends on the size of the company, but just go back in and get the feel for it, and just say to people, it's okay, I'm coming back tomorrow. What you can then do is, when you go back in the next day, you're not going to have all those questions of, how are you? What can we do to help? Because you've already done it. So you can go back into work slightly more in control of your stress levels than if you'd not taken that time to go in. It was offered to me in one set of circumstances, and I found it so helpful, because I knew I was going to have those questions. How are you? You know, what can you do when you're coming back? So that when I did go back, it was a doddle, because I'd done it all. And I could go back in, sit down and go to work. And that was a big tick for me at a time when I needed to be able to give myself a big tick. And yeah, that's is something that I would suggest people at least think about.
It's a bit about that being kind to yourself again, that you've already mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And that fair and reasonable compassionate leave or grievance policy is something that we might come back to in a moment. But now I wanted to touch a bit on your actual work at grief and bereavement counselling. What does this entail for an individual coming to see a counsellor, and how might somebody know that they need counselling?
The process of coming to a counsellor starts from the minute you make the decision that, yeah, I do need some additional help here. My family and my friends are getting on, they're not helping. They're getting on my nerves. They're saying the same thing over and over. They're expecting too much from me. I need space to think. I need time to process. So the minute you think that, you pick up the phone and dial the Butterflies number, or contact, or look on our website and complete the form there. That's the start of your counselling process. What happens then is you will receive an email from us, which will allocate you a counsellor. Sometimes that takes up to 8 weeks. Sorry about that. We're a small organisation, but we do get to people as quickly as we can. We will acknowledge your application, but then you will next hear when you've been allocated, and your counsellor will contact you to fix a mutually convenient day and time for both of you, so that you can meet weekly. We do offer face-to-face in our counselling room in Eastleigh. We do phone sessions, we do Zoom sessions. And by the time this goes out, there will hopefully be two venues in Portsmouth. You have that first interaction over the phone with your counsellor to set out the date. First couple of sessions, you automatically have 8 sessions allocated. They're not sessions, they're not weeks, because we understand that shift patterns get in the way, that illness gets in the way, that holidays get in the way, and that goes on both sides, you know, for counsellors and for our clients. So it's 8 sessions, ideally weekly. First 2 usually spent getting to know each other, you getting to feel comfortable with them, and them getting to know a bit more, to put everything into a context. And I suppose that's what both sides of you are doing. You know, you're getting comfortable with each other and looking at what it is you want to look at and deal with. And it's gentle, it's kind, it can be challenging. It doesn't always make things better straight off. It might challenge you a bit to how you did actually feel about that person. Did you like them as much as you thought you did? Were they as important to you? Or were they more important to you than that you thought they were? And it's about discovering those things about yourself, looking at those issues that you might have been worried about. Why did you get so angry? Well, perhaps there were reasons why. Perhaps there were unresolved issues between you. In a counselling room where it's totally confidential, the person you're talking to doesn't know you, isn't going to meet you outside, away from the counselling room. They're under an ethics of confidentiality. So they're not going to talk to anybody about what you say or what you've said. And it enables you to just talk through and look at all those different elements that you never have time to in your own life. We don't take time out to analyse ourselves, but this is that opportunity to. And it may well be that the counsellor will pick up on a point or two and say, oh, I wonder if, does it, you know, you were saying something else, and ties things together that you can't because it's so close to you. We don't see the things that are hitting our nose, do we? So
Indeed.
The counsellor gives you that overall distant view, because they're seeing the whole thing, not just that one little speck.
Thank you. And how long after someone has died should you wait before reaching out for counselling?
I think it's fair to say that you need to go through that absolutely horrendous process of the first shock, horror, and numbness that hits us all. I'd say 3 months. Before that, you're too numb. You need the space to be able to move through that, so that you're open to looking at things.
And I guess opposite question to that is there a time limit on how long ago that person died that you can get counselling for?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We have clients who come to us and they lost a mum, dad, partner, husband, wife, child, had a stillbirth 15, 20, 30 years ago, and they're still grieving. There is no time limit on grief. And there's a wonderful saying that somebody said to me the other day: grief never ends, but it changes. It's a passage, not a place to stay. Grief is not a sign of weakness, nor a lack of faith. It is the price of love. And I think that's lovely. And that to me says why people come to us who lost people many, many years ago, and they've never come to terms with it. Because we're thrown in at the deep end with grief. We're not taught how to deal with it. Perhaps that's something for the curriculum, national curriculum, an understanding of it, because children who don't have pets don't learn about grief and bereavement. Yeah, it's a very gentle way of introducing us to what it is to lose something that has become very dear to us.
So sometimes, and this links really, sometimes it can be difficult to know how to support someone who's grieving. Of course, it's normal to feel awkward or worried that you'll make things worse. What advice would you give to someone who's wanting to support another who is grieving?
We all do it. We all do it. I'm a trained counsellor and I still do it. We tell ourselves we don't know what to say. Actually, even if you just say, don't like the weather today, it's turned really cold, have you turned your fire on? Something that's mundane and ordinary. Don't ask them how they're doing, because they really don't know how they're doing. They're in a fog. Say, would you like to come round to me for a cup of tea? Rather than, shall I come and have a cup of tea with you? Try and just be yourself. And it's the hardest thing to do. But if you do it, and if you can't say anything, as you walk past, just a gentle touch on the shoulder that isn't going to be construed as anything else. If you know that person well enough. If you don't, please don't do that. But a smile, a nod, anything like that, that acknowledges to the person who is grieving that they've not turned into a ghost themselves, that they are there, they are occupying that space on that piece of ground, that they're not invisible. And if you say the wrong thing, hey, don't worry, they probably haven't noticed. And they're just grateful that you've bothered to speak. As I say, we've all been there, and yeah, it is a challenging one, but please don't even worry about finding the right words. Just say,
Speak.
Just speak. Yeah.
That's so true, isn't it? Just speak and let the person know that you are there. But it doesn't have to be through a how are you question.
Yeah. Yeah. And an open-ended question if possible, sort of something to you that's quite mundane, to somebody who feels that everybody's avoiding them, is an absolute bit of wisdom. It's wonderful.
Thank you. And finally, before we wrap up today, the constabulary puts looking after our people at the heart of what we do. So what things could an organisation such as Hampshire Constabulary do to better support its own people who are grieving?
Recognise, excuse me, recognise why that person's grieving, who they're grieving about, what their grief pattern is. Particularly in the constabulary, is it somebody who's had a lot of work-related trauma to deal with, trauma in terms of death, coupled with the death of parents or children or somebody within their own family and friends. Let's not forget, our friends are part of our family. They're part of that overall environment that are special to us. So look at somebody looking at that individual's trauma history, if you like, in terms of incidents at work, and any issues at home around long-term illness, short-term illness. You don't have to be have a long-term illness to suddenly die. But if somebody comes in and says, oh, my dad's just had a heart attack and died, you know, before they are told, okay, well, you've got your however long it is, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I guess it's not that long, I don't know, time off, look at it and see what else has happened that could be unresolved for that person. And sorry, guys, you're as soft as the rest of us. You know, you put on this hard, tough face, but, you know, it does all play on the brain, and it does affect us all. And I think that's the best thing that any employer can do, instead of just seeing either just that official request for leave due to bereavement, or the doctor's note that says because of bereavement. Then take that opportunity to look a little bit further and just check that as an employer, you are doing your best by that person in terms of their mental health that's been affected by ongoing trauma. Otherwise, you're going to have a force made up of people with PTSD, and none of us want that.
You mentioned at the beginning something about a reasonable policy. Can you say any more on that?
I think the bereavement policies I've worked under in the past have been draconian. You know, 1 day off for a grandparent, 2 days off for a parent. Hopefully things have moved on from there. There needs to be an understanding that bereavement is natural. It's something that's going to happen to all of us and every single one of us. And with this growing awareness of mental health, that people, by that I mean employers, understand the impact that bereavement has on people. It does have physical manifestations. It also has huge unseen mental impact. It can leave people free mentally of that overwhelming presence of mum or dad, you're no good, you know, and the impact that has on somebody when that's suddenly taken away need not be, great, I'm free of them. It can be, oh, my boundaries have gone. What do I do? And it's about looking at the situation, not from where you as an individual, how you would view it and how you think you would cope with it, but think outside your own personal box as to how the wider ramifications of it all. And actually, none of us know how we're going to react in different situations. Bearing in mind, going back to what I said at the beginning, every bereavement is different and individual in how we receive it, how we process it, and how we respond to it in our own being, in our social being, and in our work being. It's an unknown.
Thank you, Julie, so much for your time today, and thank you to you and your counsellors and to Butterflies for all that you do. It is greatly appreciated for people who are grieving. So if you'd like support on this topic, please do get in touch with your Force chaplaincy and feel free to reach out to Butterflies direct. Their website is butterfliesbereavement, all one word, .co.uk. Thank you so much for tuning in to this interview this week. Thank you.